Hello, and welcome to Lawless Conversations with Katie. I'm Katie, your host. This podcast goes through various difficult subjects such as abortion, gun control, prison systems, or gender, to name a few, and dives into all different aspects of the arguments that might be offered or discussed. At the moment, we are wading our way through the subject of abortion, and today I am interviewing a man to see the male perspective and male experience of the whole idea of abortion and the responsibility that a man has versus a woman. Although I have spent a lot of time and effort into researching these topics, I am by no means an expert on this subject or any other subject I will explore in the future. So take my thoughts with a grain of salt, and of course, if you have any questions or things to add, please share them. I try my best to keep my own biases out of these explorations, and because I'm talking about many aspects of a subject, including opposing ideas and arguments, know that these are not necessarily ideas that I subscribe to or hold personally. I will, however, explore different arguments as if I do believe in them in order to truly explore all facets of this subject. Finally, because these are difficult subjects, there will be some content that is hard to hear and might be triggering. Please understand I am not looking to insult anyone, but to explore these subjects openly and honestly. I don't want to convince anyone to think like me. I want to convince people to think, period. So without further ado, come have a lawless conversation with me. All right. Welcome, Bobby John.
Awesome.
Okay, so obviously abortion
Yes.
is talked about mainly in relation to women and their experiences and bodily autonomy and all of that. So I wanted to take the time, especially since on Wednesday I talked about men being taken out of this scenario completely and how that would screw up a lot of things. So I'm just kind of curious your perspective of the whole abortion discussion from a man's point of view.
Yeah, it's really interesting how I think, like you said in a couple of times throughout your episodes so far, is the clear line that is the clear line of separation between this discussion of abstinence and abortion and all of these that is separated so much between men and women, as far as like it's just the woman's thing,
Yeah.
And yet men are very much a willing party and partner in contributing to what goes on. And so it's very easy, I could see, and from my limited point of view, how men could just walk away and not have to deal with any of the consequences of it. That's a little challenging for me to recognize that that we don't, as men, take more initiative and care and concern in the fact that women do have to deal with this on a monthly basis, and they have to deal with the challenges that come along with it. So when it comes to the abortion subject, it is really interesting that we are so far removed because we don't have a body connection to it.
Right.
And so it's just crazy to me how much that I would assume that most men that I've talked to probably don't even know what process is gone through. And I know I've talked to a few women who've been through that process, and it is just crazy the amount of emotional stability that it takes to even try and get your head around the decision, much less to actually make it happen. Right. And yet their bodies are in the middle of it, so they have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, it's just sad to me that we don't take a more active role in it, in the connection to the cause and the solution of, being there for a woman if she chooses to have an abortion, or actually choosing to do our part to keep that from being possible.
Right. On that subject, I know we've talked about like the male birth controls.
Yes.
That are either available in other countries or are being studied. So, if you could share some of your your thoughts about that.
Yeah, actually, back a little bit of time after I got married, I looked into the male contraceptive because I'm sure that it's probably pretty common that most people do not like condoms.
Yeah. On either side of the
either
fence.
side of the fence, yes. And so I was looking for another option. I'm also I tend to sway towards the more natural side of things. So I really didn't want to change my body in the sense of like do a which actually was really interesting in one of your episodes where you talked about the fact that men don't want to change their body when women have to change their body all the time, and it is I was a little guilt ridden there because I was like, well, actually, yeah, I didn't want to go get a vasectomy because I didn't want to change my body, but for me it was more of a natural process thing. I hate that women have to take the pill on their side of things. So I was looking for something, and I'd come across a male contraceptive that is used in India and in Europe, and with just a very simple, it literally is an outpatient doctor visit, and it's reversible. And so I was looking it up. I even gave money to this group who was bringing it to the U.S. and sadly, they still haven't been able to get it passed for usage in the U.S. And this is, over 10 years ago that I was looking into this. And I was just livid that they couldn't get it passed in the U.S. I wanted to be a part of the trials. I really wanted to make this happen because I knew that there was another option out there that would give me the power to be able to take it into my own hands and not leave that on the female to always have to be the one, And so, yes, I've looked into it. There's, a couple of different companies that have tried over and over again to try and get something like that passed and used for use in the U.S. And they always end up with some kind of stop somewhere. I, like you said earlier, the struggles that they had with it, and the very, I'm sure to the men it was probably pretty major, but technically would be minute compared to most women's monthly pain
and
experience. Exactly.
I did have someone point out the other day. They were like, I think biologically men do not have as high a pain tolerance as women. So that could be one factor in, even though they're experiencing the same symptoms, that they're more intense for men sometimes because they don't have that high of a pain tolerance as women do. But I haven't researched anything about that, and I also still feel like that's a cop-out. Like,
Totally.
It's fine.
I think it would be interesting to look up to see if it's not necessarily that they have a lower pain tolerance, it's that they're not used to inside pain physically, because we don't deal with most of everything for men is an outward thing, whereas women deal with inside pain all the time, like from day one. I mean, from the first day they have a period, it's all coming from the inside. And so, especially within the entire conversation of the evolving male of being able to cry and be vulnerable and that kind of a thing, that all comes from the inside. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it men are pretty tough on the outside. We can take quite a bit. I mean, they're rough up men pretty easily. But it's that all on the outside instead of versus something internally that's causing this pain versus something outward that we can handle. And it probably changes the way in which it affects us because mentally we're structured differently.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I never considered that.
Yeah.
Also, just for the listeners, the thing you're talking about, I believe, is called Riceg, the male birth control.
I think the one that I had looked up was, and it may have changed names, but the one that I looked up, I think it's called Vagisil.
Okay.
it sounded a whole like the cream that you use,
Yeah.
and I was like, wait a second. But no, I haven't looked it up in a while, but to see where their progress is. But I know they were continued to try, and they kept trying to fund it, and you know.
The one I looked up or found research on was called RISIG.
Okay.
And I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an acronym. Reversible something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But essentially, it creates a barrier where the sperm comes out and essentially damages the sperm before it gets ejaculated.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because the one that I looked up, the process that I had read about was that there was basically a doctor's visit, because they would go in and they would insert a protein polymer, is what they called it, into the tubes, and your body builds up a natural resistance to it and causes a blockage. And then basically the same thing as what a vasectomy would do, as far as like cutting off that tube of the flow of sperm to the channel. And then basically, if you ever wanted to have kids, then they would go back in and they would put a solution in there that would break down that protein and open up the tract again. And so far, from what I read in India and other places, they have been very, very successful with this process of, being able to offer that. But yeah, I'm sure there's so many different ways in which, the medical industry, I'm sure has, around the world has found better solutions to this, situation. It is very interesting and would be very intriguing to study or to find out the information as to why it is blocked so heavily in the U.S. And what that stems from, and the fact that there really should be at least a little bit more of a leveling of responsibility. And I think it would change a lot of things to have that, to have that piece, like you were saying in one of the other episodes about responsibility and the spreading out that responsibility, and how that would change the way in which that we choose. When you have all of the options to be able to choose instead of being cut off, what different choice would you make if you had a different choice, but it does seem to be as though something wants us only to have one choice, whatever that be.
And it's bizarre because we've obviously had plenty of time to develop this.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense that there isn't one.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense that there's no male birth control. However, even in just in talking to people around me or talking to men around me, there's so many men who I talk to who are like, there's no way I would take a male birth control.
Wow.
There's so much. Some men I meet, they're like, yeah, totally, I'd be in for that. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Even just this weekend, I was at a friend's birthday party.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him and another friend before it started about this podcast.
Yeah.
And about how there needs to be a male birth control and how that would affect things. And both of them are like, no way I would take a male birth control. There's no way. And I was just like, why? It's...
Right?
I don't even have words to express my rage right now. What are you thinking? So it's also, I guess, not even just creating a male birth control, but just changing whatever stigma men have in their minds against being a part of that. I don't know, consequences are part of the protection. I don't know what it is.
Well, and I really do think it comes down to the fact that we don't deal with it.
That's fair.
It's so far removed from whatever, our daily lives, our daily interactions, even sexually, it's so far removed, especially nowadays with the fact that it is so prevalent that a female is on a birth control.
Yeah.
So they, that it's amazing how much we don't even think about that. Like it just doesn't cross our mind. Oh, a baby. Oh, okay. Well, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And it's and then somebody says, well, but you have a responsibility in this, and you're like, yeah, but my part is really easily fixable. Right. It's like, wait a minute.
I could just disappear if I need to.
Exactly. And you're like, no. We just said your responsibility in this, and it's just amazing the mentality that that is out there, sadly, that does not desire that equal commitment, and so then I'm obviously when asked to, that would be a very interesting study to find out, because I'm sure you're probably correct. And I'm being the internal optimist, I would hope that would not be that way, but that quite a few men would not desire to take anything.
Actually, that just gives me a really good idea.
Yeah.
Of like putting together a panel of like 3 or 4 men who are of different opinions on that, and having a discussion with them for this as well.
Great.
Just to kind of see the perspectives of like why a man would choose that. Because like I can't personally figure out why, unless you're just I can't think of any reason why, other than like hormonal birth control obviously is quite disruptive and damaging to your body. So I could understand if, like you were saying, you were looking for a more natural way to contribute in that way. Yeah. But if you're not of that opinion, I want to know like why. So that's actually I might do that.
No, that's a great idea. I would enjoy hearing the conversations that would go on, because I'm sure there's quite a bit of opinion out there, I'm sure. Oh man, let the egos fly.
Heck yes. Oh man. So what is generally your reaction as a man when someone expresses to you they have had an abortion? Like, have you ever had any conversations with women in relation to that they have had an abortion?
It's not necessarily a conversation that comes up very often.
Right.
Even though women tell me a lot of things.
That's right.
They tend to be an open book around me, which is sometimes surprising. But no, as far as like my interactions, mostly it's been kind of hearsay of, as far as interactions with someone, I don't know that I would have an account.
Okay.
It's mostly kind of like off the cuff. It's not like we delved deep into the conversation of it.
So if a woman were to confide in you and like tell you, or you're on the subject and she's like, well, I've had an abortion, what would your reaction be to that?
Okay. My reaction would be, I'm sorry that had to be your choice. That would be my reaction, because I would feel sad that she was put in that spot. Obviously, I know she had a choice in it, but whoever was with her also had a choice in it, and it would just be a sadness over, and then probably further from the next, whatever the next phrase would be from there would be, just a comforting of, that doesn't have to say anything about who you are. But, so don't let it be, you are you, and the choices that you've made have brought you to the place to be the person that you are. And, but they don't have to determine who you are, right. Because obviously, the choices that we make as we grow, from a young person into an adult, and we mature to the point that we recognize the effects of our choices. Whereas when we're younger, it doesn't happen as quickly. That whole thought process just, is not there. That would definitely be, I would really just want to give her a big hug and say it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, I feel a sense of just huge caring for the fact that would need to be a choice for her.
What, in your opinion, would be the best solution? Let's ask this in a few different ways. Okay. What do you think would be the best solution if abortion is banned or taken away? Like, what do you think is the best solution to fix the issues of abortion if it's not available at all?
Definitely my first thought would be a very equal amount of options for deterring or delaying pregnancy. Okay. From both the male and female side. Obviously we know that there's tons of options for females, but there's nothing for men other than a condom.
Or vasectomy.
But so I guess there's nothing. There's two options that are...
There's two very unreliable and unreversible, yes, pointless, yeah.
That would be my first thing, would be, if you're going to take abortion away, offer us an option for something that's going to work effectively since we know it's out there. From there, obviously it would come down to a personal choice, whether you choose abstinence, whether you choose something else to delay it, or whether you would choose to continue in the act that's going to create something. I don't know, and really don't care to be a part of the guessing game as to what it would be like for someone who is in a rape or incest or anything like that. I understand that happens, and would hope that the person, that the female would have an option in that case. Mm-hmm. And if she didn't, and it was totally gone, that she would be willing to have the child and put it up for adoption. I know there's lots of logistics there that create all kinds of havoc in all kinds of conversations around her having to go through full term, and the fact that it could tax her body and so many things. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to then having to give your kid off, and
I can only imagine how much rage and anger I would be seething into the child growing into me if I was raped and had to bring that child to term.
True.
And especially, when you go out walking around and you're pregnant, yep, people have this tendency to be like, oh, congratulations, or touch your belly. Right. And I can only imagine, yep, the things I would say to people.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I know, I do think that the things that happen in the womb, or when a baby is in the womb, does affect the growth of the child. So. And so it doesn't even. Actually, I'm not going to say that because I haven't studied it myself. Someone just told me that, so I'm not going to say that. Nice. But I do think that whatever emotions you're having or whatever experiences you're having while you're pregnant with that child, they're going to have different reactions when they're older, when they're growing up, based on the things that you experience. Like if you experienced a trauma,
sure,
or if you just various things like that. So it doesn't make sense to me to already have a child on the wrong foot, mm-hmm, from the moment that fertilization happens.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't know if I'd be willing to go to counseling to deal with that, because I'm already having to give my body for this asshole who decided to rape me. I'm not going to give my money to try and love this thing he put in me,
Right.
So that bothers me so much. The concept that people would be able to decide that for people. Mm-hmm. through law.
Yep.
And oftentimes it being men making these laws and not being able to ever experience that. And like it just,
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
that one gets me.
I can imagine, because obviously your body experience tells you so much more than what we ever will know as a man. And so, that piece of things is, like I said, I mean, I really don't have, I would have no foot in the conversation, and I think it's very interesting that they feel like we do. When their laws are passed and that kind of a thing, it does seem as though we come from the perspective that we have this great view on it and understanding, when we have none.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's very similar to the, I have heard, I can't tell you, countless women have told me that whether they wanted it or whether they didn't want children, once they had children, it was totally different for the fact that it was their child. And so, not in any case where they really didn't want the child to abort it, but just in normal marriage and family life, that they were like, no, I really don't want to have kids, but then ended up pregnant and decided to have the child. And it said it's just you can't relate it. Like, it doesn't matter how many times somebody tells you what it's like to have a child of your own, until you have a child of your own, it's a totally different experience. There's just no way to describe it or prepare somebody for it. And so, just in that, with that simple thought, how can I say that I would even know what it would be like? Because I don't, And so the fact that we continue to make laws as if we knew what was going on a male side of things is very, very challenging.
Yeah. Though I do feel like if you follow that thought process down to the extreme, you get the people who are like, men shouldn't be involved at all in this decision, which I don't agree with, because obviously half of the DNA
I was
is
going to say
man's.
We are involved.
Right. Like it is obviously a two people to tango situation. Yep. So like I do agree that to a certain extent, men making decisions about it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. I also don't see where it makes sense to take them out completely.
And I would totally agree.
Because there's so many... It just makes no sense.
Yeah, well, and like I said before, if we are a willing partner in the
sexual act,
then we should be a willing party and connector person to the solution of whatever that is. And that's why I really think that, if I was to ask for, hope for any kind of advocation, I don't know that I would necessarily be on the side of for or against abortion. I would be at the beginning, in the sense of I would be on the panel that is asking for more solutions for men to have a contraceptive, because then we are flattening the playing field.
Right.
Now we're saying, okay, you have an option. And the women could stand up and say, hey, actually, I'm going to ask that you do this if you're going to be a part of this relationship. And that would give me more power in the ability to take responsibility. Whereas now all I can do is, go get a surgery that may or may not work and wear a condom every time.
On that note, I was thinking that was the only way to market a male birth control to men. I feel like for some men, obviously marketing it in the sense of like, you're lifting some of the burden from women and making it more equal would be fine. Yeah. But I realize almost the only way that would really work for most men is to present it to them in the sense of, you will be given control.
Yeah, the power and control. You now have power over when
who gets pregnant,
exactly.
when they get pregnant.
Yep.
And so, like, that's the only way I could think of that would make them go, oh, yeah, I want to do that because
I want more control of this.
Which sucks, but you know what? At this point, I would use it. Like,
hey.
You know what would be great, honey? If you just had more control in this relationship when it came to children. How do you like this idea? Like,
that's been the. I just wish you'd had more control. Yeah. That's definitely a conversation that could be used to advocate for it, for sure. Yep. I mean, advertising uses all kinds of things, so hey, why not? Why not? Yeah, definitely.
Oh man.
And so I know it's the case of adoption. I know I've known a couple of people who've been really close to me who had a child from an adoption, and the other one was actually part of the foster adoption. And it is it's very, very sad that our processes aren't more streamlined, number one, and number two, set up in such a way that it benefits the child and not the other way around. Listening to your last Glenn's interview, that piece of feeling as though that you're only a part of this family because of money. Man, I can't imagine what that kind of reality would do to shape a child. I mean, it's just crazy to me. And yet, you've got so many children who are in the system, and luckily we have some incredible organizations here that are working in that system. I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico for over 10 years, and there's a couple out there, and they get some of the worst case, their foster family, but they're really, really good at working with children from worst case scenarios, like a infant who was left in their crib for 2 years, and so they don't speak, they don't know how to act. I mean, it's just crazy, stuff like that. But I mean, they're just so incredibly patient with caring for these children, and then seeing them, go off into a family and be joined, it's just really interesting how much of that doesn't facilitate the opportunity for the best life. And I think that's really what a lot of this conversation really could come down to, not should, but could come down to, and that is the conversation of what kind of life do we want to produce. And I know that that's not something that's thought about when you're in the middle of sex.
If this person gets pregnant, I wonder what kind of life the kid's gonna have.
Exactly. But obviously there somewhere it needs to be, the education and information needs to be there for people to be able to understand that there's a responsibility there. If you're going to not protect yourself and take responsibility in this, then somewhere somebody's going to take responsibility for it,
right?
And I really agree with your piece on if we were going to cut out abortion, I think that people who are advocating for that should be on the responsibility side.
Right.
I mean, if just as with the male being responsible for his piece, I think it really comes down to that piece for me of personal responsibility. If you want to be a part of this, take responsibility. And I know that's a hard conversation to have with a lot of people.
I actually go deeper into that in other episodes as well. The idea of personal responsibility.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, and I also go into the concept of, I think one of the third or fourth from the last episode, I talk about aftercare after birth. Like the fact that a lot of people don't, when we're talking about abortion, we don't go beyond the abortion.
Sure.
We're talking about it should or shouldn't happen, or you're a good person or you're a bad person for not letting it happen, or there's so many other options, and then we stop there.
Right.
Or we don't even make it, further into that conversation because everybody's just upset and angry and yelling at each other.
Right.
And we never get to that other side of, okay, you bring this baby into life, but what kind of life? And that, like, that is a huge consideration that must be considered. And usually, I feel like if people do bring that up, it's to make accusations to people and say you don't care about the baby once it's born, which in some instances it feels that way, especially if you're stuck with this kid and or you're stuck with the guilt of having given a kid up for adoption and you didn't want that, but now you're stuck with that, and it's like, what kind of life did I just put my kid into because of your decisions, to make this illegal. So yeah, I do eventually go into that as well, but it's an interesting part of the discussion that I don't think enough people look at.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the life of the mother and what, choice creates. And every choice we have creates something. So to say, yeah, this choice created that, and then stop. But not continue to say, okay, well, that choice creates this, which creates this, which creates this, which creates this. Right. And if you don't continue down that path, like you said, you won't have the knowledge and the experience to understand the full impact of what you're asking.
Or the perspective. Like, studying this stuff has been exhausting because of the amount of paradigm shifts that I've been forced to experience, in the sense of having one thought on something that was like hardcore, like this is what it is, and then researching and being like, oh, well, I was kind of wrong on that, and now I don't know what to think,
Right. Oh, yeah.
And like it's yeah, I remember actually when I wrote that section on having people be put in the foster care and adoption systems to take in the kids. Yeah. I wrote it originally quite suggestively and like here's a funny solution that doesn't make sense and isn't feasible. And Shane, my brother-in-law, he read it and he was like, I can't argue with this. Like, I think you need to take out the suggestiveness of this and state it in the sense of more matter of fact, because this makes sense. Yeah. And I've never considered that before. And it's messing with my head. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, I can do that.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's so much fun to have looked so far into this subject to see so many aspects of it. And I have no solutions. I have no answers. I have nothing except the fact that I just ride the fence on everything now. Like, literally, like, I'm like, I get this and I get that and I understand that and I also understand this, but that's all I got. Like,
you're right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Perspective, and that's it.
Oh man. Yep. Yeah, that's it. The more you delve into it, the more there is to delve into. Yeah. And it is amazing when you get down to it. I still, that personal responsibility thing is really hard to run from.
It is.
I mean, when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter how far you want to run or what side you want to run to. It comes down to everybody has a choice, and this is your choice. Yeah, it's a challenge.
It is.
Very interesting subject. I'm so glad you're taking them on.
Thank you.
It's really, really cool.
Well, thank you for talking with me and giving me a great idea.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I'd love to bring you on for that discussion.
Heck yes, I'm in.
Find some men to talk to about birth control.
That's right. I'm in.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you are interested in commenting about this episode, you are welcome to. You can either send me an email at lawlessconversations@yahoo.com. That is LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS@yahoo.com. You can also comment on Twitter at Lawless Convos, LAWLESSCONVOS. Finally, you can also contact me on Facebook if you just look for Lawless Conversations, 2 different words, LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS. I look forward to hearing from you. The references to any sources that I use in each episode will be available in the bio, along with all of these social media connections. Join me next week as we dive into the aspect of abortion that is not very pleasant and probably quite triggering for most people, and that would be rape. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I look forward to next week.